All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got a special guest here today, Ken Schnacke. He has been the cornerstone of professional baseball in Columbus for nearly 5 decades. President, general manager of the Columbus Clippers, the AAA affiliate of the Cleveland Indians. They were once the affiliate of the New York Yankees. Ken is, we think of him here in Ohio, but really he's a professional baseball man all across America. Any of the executives in baseball know of Ken. They know how smart he's been. They know how much he's been able to do as the leader of the AAA baseball. And the Clippers here has become like a model franchise. They have numerous national awards, community engagement, fan experience. I've known them for a long time. And we do have a great ballpark here called the Huntington Park, which was opened in 2009. And it's absolutely fantastic. People will pile in there. They don't charge an arm and a leg to go to a game. The stadium is fantastic, and people have a ball, just what baseball used to be. Am I right, Ken? Used to be
Yes,
like
you're right.
that.
You're right, Governor.
So, Ken, here we are in the World Series coming up here, and I'm not sure I'm going to watch it because I already know who's going to win. You know,
Well, you think you're who's going to win. By all rights, it should be the Dodgers because they spent the most money. But Toronto also was a pretty big spender, and so these are two of the high revenue teams that
good
are
point.
to battle it out. Had it been Seattle or had it been Milwaukee, it really would have been a battle of the small revenue versus the big revenue. But right now, it's probably two of the top 10 revenue producing teams in Major League Baseball.
So, Ken, somebody told me that the three starting pitchers for the Dodgers has a payroll larger than the Brewers have for their entire team. Is that correct or pretty close?
Yeah, I would not doubt that at all. And if they're larger than the Brewers, they got to be pretty close to uh, beating the Cleveland Guardians payroll too.
So, Ken, here's my concern. As you know, you and I've talked about this many times, and there people that are watching will relate to this. When I was a kid, the Pittsburgh Pirates, Roberto Clemente, We Are Family, Willie Stargell, packing Forbes Field, then going to Three Rivers, but not as much, of course. And now, what's the point? After 30 days or 60 days, Pittsburgh has no chance. A small market team. They've got the best pitcher in baseball, Paul Skeens. He's not going to stay with Pittsburgh. That ace that pitches for the Yankees now, I can't remember his name, but he was with Pitt. I mean, they trade whenever it comes close to signing a player, they either trade them early or they trade them late. So they trade them earlier so they can get some money out of it. Cincinnati, Cleveland, you and I love the Indians. We followed them. We couldn't believe the end of this season. By and large, most of the time, the small market teams can't compete. And I think baseball is becoming regional. I think we're losing the small market people are losing interest. Is that going to make baseball not what it used to be if this continues, or am I wrong, Ken?
No, I think you're correct. I really don't know what the future holds for the game. There's going to be a work stoppage after the 2026 season. It sounds like the commissioner will act first and lock out the players when the season's over. The owners are looking for a better grasp on salaries. They'd like to have a salary cap. The players are dead set against the salary cap. Major League Baseball is the only one of the four sports that does not have a salary cap. However, other than Shoni Otani, who signed a contract for $700 million for 10 years, and he deferred 68 million of it. He's living off 2 million a year plus all the merchandising deals he has over in Japan and this country. The next highest paid player is Juan Soto, averaging 51 million a year. And to be honest, there's a lot of NFL quarterbacks that are making 45 to 50 million dollars a year. If you have a salary cap, you also then have to have a salary floor, which means there'll be a minimum spend, and that would be directed at teams like the Pirates, the Reds, the Guardians. those clubs that are not being able to compete, and to some degree not even trying to compete. Now the Guardians have been pretty good at competing with a small payroll, and Cincinnati did wonders this year with the addition of Terry Francona as their manager. So some of the small market teams can compete, but as you said, it's for a year or two, and then their window closes and they have to start all over.
Let's break this down a little bit. So we know that in the NFL, every place where there's a team, those folks have a chance to win a title, Super Bowl. If you play in the NBA, you had Oklahoma City won the title. Oklahoma City, it's not exactly New York or LA. Um, if you look at hockey, it's the same thing. Every city has an opportunity to win, and the fans get excited. So what they have really, if I understand this right, is they have a salary cap. So if you play for the Pittsburgh Steelers and you give Aaron Rodgers 30 million a year, there's less for other players because there's a cap on how much money that can be spent by a team. So if you spend too much on a handful of players, then you got other players that are not paid very much and may not be as good. Is that one of the problems, Ken? That there's
Yeah,
no salary cap. So you can spend $700 million on a player and it doesn't affect the rest of the players. So you can pay everybody what they want.
yeah. I mean, you take the let's take the Dodgers. I just saw something in print where their revenue stream was $440 million, and they spent 400 million on their payroll. There was another club, maybe Cleveland was in the range of making 265 million and spending like 150 million on payroll. So there's some great disparities. You know, it's a little bit along the lines of teams that want to win no matter what the cost, and teams and owners that are a little more practical when it comes to the business model and making the numbers work.
But Ken, if you are in Los Angeles or you're in New York or you're in Houston, any of these, Chicago for that matter, you have a lot more revenue too, right? Because you get the TV revenue, you get all the broadcast revenue, and you don't share it with anybody like they do in the NFL, right? Because the NFL has a national contract and everybody gets a piece of it. But in
Well, so
baseball,
does Major League Baseball. They have national contracts with ESPN, Peacock, and everything. All of that money is divided equally between all 30 teams. What's not divided equally are the local contracts that are done in the local cities. And you're right, to that end, New York, Houston, Los Angeles, Chicago, much bigger markets, their local deals are far more substantial than what you're getting in Cincinnati, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh.
so Ken, if I were to make you the commissioner or the king, the king of baseball, and I said, fix this so that everybody has a fighting chance, that every team can compete for the Major League Baseball title. What are the two or three things that you would do?
Well,
So that people can understand, because you and I can talk about salary caps and revenue sharing and all that, but make it simple for the fan who wants baseball to come back.
you know, I wish I could, but I don't think I can, because the Major League Players Association is the strongest union in the world. And so anything that baseball does to try to move forward has to involve their participation. Now, the commissioner has gotten around some of the things that the Players Association didn't like by being able to try it out for a year and then put it on them. That had to do with the designated hitter. It had to do with the runner on second base. It had to do with the time clock. And next year they're going to add the ABS challenge system, which we have had in AAA for the last couple of years. So some of the things that even the players union hasn't liked, the commissioner's been able to get it in over a 2-year period. But this is a bigger mountain to climb. This you have to be able to prove to the players that those guys are really going to be taken care of. And right now, unfortunately, some of the major league veterans they're only thinking of the high side of the equation because they didn't have the low side of the equation. And so they're not really interested in an equalization at this point in their career. I don't know when we're going to get to where that's going to be acceptable, but that's going to have to become the point upon which a new deal can be worked that will give teams more hope.
So you would basically the salary cap, if you could magically make it happen, limit the amount that each team could spend. That would sort of equalize things, right? Because some spend a lot more than others, and they buy the best players in the game.
Yeah, but from the union side, once again, trying to play both sides, not only are the players worried or concerned about the baseball income stream around the ballpark, they're worried about the battery and baseball village and all the other entities that the owners have built surrounding their ballparks that they're deriving revenue with and is not being shared. The players feel that they should be a part of that sharing formula too, and the owners do not. And that one's a kind of a tough one to call.
Well,
The
that's
owners
interesting. Ken, tell us about that. I'm unaware of what you're talking about. What are these places? Like, give me an
Okay,
example.
outside Truist Field in Atlanta, they have a complex called the Battery with restaurants and shops and everything. It goes every day of the week and it's packed on days when the Braves are at home. St. Louis has what they call Baseball Village, and it's the same type of thing. It's bars and shops and everything surrounding the ballpark that are active all year long, but hyperactive whenever the baseball team is at home. In those occasions, the ownership of the baseball team has an interest in that surrounding properties, and they are realizing revenue for that the players feel that they are not sharing.
Well, maybe okay. So compromise means everybody gets pinched a little bit for the greater good, right? So if the owners had to share some of that extra revenue that's being generated, and if the players would realize I mean, they're, you got to have leadership because they're not going to like this. They're not going to want to have a salary cap. Bryce Harper, the hero of well, I guess he has not won a title. He was in D.C. and then he switched to Philadelphia. I don't think he's won a title. Didn't he get into a fight with the owner or the
Commissioner.
commissioner of baseball and threw him out of the clubhouse because they were talking
Well,
about a salary cap?
he verbally threw him out of the clubhouse, not physically.
Okay.
So, and the commissioner tried to talk over that and tried to explain it. But once again, when you've got some dominant veteran leaders like that, the younger guys don't say boo because they're just happy to be there.
To
They're
be on the
happy to
baseball team.
be on the team, to be making the minimum, and to having a lifestyle that those of us could only dream of.
And Ken, and when it gets to revenue sharing, that's just basically you say that the national contracts allow some revenue sharing. I just learned something new here, but a big chunk of their money comes from the local media contracts, right? And
Yes.
that should be shared across the board. I mean, you know, Pittsburgh or Cleveland for that matter, we don't have these giant media contracts like they have in LA or New York. There ought to be some sharing of that revenue as well.
Well, the other side of that coin is it's a lot more expensive to live and operate in New York and in Los Angeles, both for the team and everything they do and for the owners. So, that's the can of corn that gets tossed around all the time. The bigger cities have a much higher, much more financial stake because of the cost of living and working in those places.
Yeah. You sound like Solomon in a lot of ways, but I think you would agree that if we don't get this fixed, um, you look down there at the Marlins, their ballpark, would they get 10,000 a game? I got a 50,000 seat stadium, and nobody shows up. I mean, I think baseball, you watch these playoff games, the places are always jammed, people get excited, but on the normal basis, on these small market teams, you're not filling those stadiums, right? I mean, there's not the interest that there used to be.
Well, overall, though, if you look, baseball has been in a growth pattern of in ballpark attendance for the last 5 years. And yeah, while you're right, during the week, some of the teams have problems. I mean, Cleveland and Cincinnati were pretty much mostly sold out on weekend dates once the weather cleared in mid to late May. So, some are having challenges, some aren't so bad. We're in the middle of trying to get two new ballparks. The team out in the Oakland A's are temporarily playing in Sacramento, which is a AAA facility. They have broken ground in Las Vegas for their new stadium. And Tampa Bay had to relocate to a Class A field, Steinbrenner Field in Tampa, because of the roof damage from the hurricane. And that's being prepared for next year. But the new group that just bought Tampa wants a brand new stadium down there. So, things keep moving along. The ballparks keep getting more expensive, more up to date. It's really unbelievable that this thing just keeps growing in all the sports.
So, Ken, you basically think that there is not a crisis right now, that the fact that Pittsburgh, I mean, we get these small market teams, St. Louis, whoever it is, Milwaukee, you can have your good years, but most of the time you're going to be in the bottom because you're not going to have the best players. So you're kind of saying you think all is good.
No, I'm not saying all is good. I don't think all is good. I think baseball is in a tough place. I think with all the issues they've had, they've let some of the other sports get by them and get ahead of them. And they are struggling for fans. We're also struggling a little bit from talent. When they took over the minor leagues coming out of COVID, the first thing they did was get rid of 42 teams. And by doing that, that took away a professional contract for 1,200 players. So the base of the pyramid now to develop players is much smaller than it was before 2020. So what you're have happen is you're having players getting to the big leagues, major leagues, that haven't had really enough repetition. So you're seeing, as a baseball guy, you see a lot of errors and things that you wouldn't have seen 10 or 15 years ago because the players would have had more developmental time in the minor leagues. In football and in basketball, that happens because a lot of these players come from the major colleges, and playing at Ohio State is just a tad below playing in an NFL stadium.
That's very good. But I'm maintaining now that the NIL money, which is out of control in college football, is turning college football into a minor league for the NFL, and I think it's going to have a profound impact over time. But we're not. I mean, if you want to comment on that, that's fine. But you're a baseball guy more than an NIL guy. But do you have a
Right.
sense of that?
Yes, I think that's going to cause some problems. And I think you've seen in Major League Baseball, the gambling issue is going to be causing some problems. We've seen where Clase and Ortiz have been banned by the commissioner's office from playing with Cleveland from about May on. And if they are proved to have been involved in gambling, then their major league careers are over. I mean, gambling and betting parlors and stuff have become way more significant partner with Major League Sports than ever before. And
You're
I
right.
think there's some danger in that. And I think that danger transcends to college. I don't think minor leagues, you're not supposed, there's no gambling on minor league baseball. And thank God there's no gambling on high school football. But yeah, colleges they
Yet,
potentially are
Ken.
a problem.
Yet. There's no gambling yet, but just don't hold your breath. All right, let's talk about cost for a family. I'm always thinking about that. One of the things I always thought is, and I don't know why I think about this when I was governor, Ken, I would have reserved a couple thousand seats for, that kid that's in the backyard catching football, pretending that he's the Ohio State quarterback or whatever, or, playing baseball and you're Kirk Gibson trying to hit a home run. Uh, I kind of felt that maybe I should reserve 1,000 or 2,000 seats and get the university to do it. So people didn't have a lot of money could go to the game. When I look at the Huntington Park, what does it cost to get in? What does the refreshments cost? And compare that to when you go to a big major league baseball game, what it costs for a family.
Well, one thing I'm proud of is in my 50 years how we've contained our costs. When we opened in 1977, an adult general admission ticket was $5. In our 50th year, it's all the way up to $8. I,
So in 50 years, the price of a general admission ticket at Huntington has gone from $5 to $8. That's what I would call inflation.
yes, and and our kids are comparable. You know, we have $10 reserve seats, and then we've got some box and club seats that are between $20 and $24. That's our most expensive ticket. Food and beverage, you know, we're averaging probably about $10 to $12 per person when they're in the ballpark. But you know, we have a lot of food specials. We do our fabulous Dime a Dog nights, and we have dollar days on Wednesdays, and a $5 deal on Friday with pizza and Pepsi. And so we know that there's a lot of families that need to stretch their dollar, and we try to fit into that. And then on Sunday, on family days, we have a reserve plan where the entire family, mom, dad, and up to 4 kids can get in for $20 for a reserve seat or $10 for general admission. Yeah, when you start to compare those to major league prices, it really is comical because there's just no comparison.
Ken, how did you do this? And what's been the key to it, keeping those costs down?
The key is cost containment, and it's watching your budget and living within your means. You know, we never got a tax dollar in Columbus. We were able to borrow the money against the Franklin County 5A bond rating, but we have to pay all of that back along with the debt on the loans. So we have been self-sufficient for 50 years. So obviously, in order to be self-sufficient, and we have to pay for everything, utilities, all improvements, field, all the personnel. You just got to watch your bottom line to be able to do that and keep your prices low. So we've been very fortunate. We've been very careful of doing it. But the one thing we don't have are player costs. Those are covered by Cleveland as part of our player development contract. If you throw those in, then it becomes a whole different ballgame.
Um, so you think it's still, I mean, it's really tough for families, right, in the major league ballparks. I mean, it just costs a
Yes.
lot of money.
Some of them have deals. Cleveland has some deals. They have some $2 beer days in their right field party corner, and they do some specials. And you can go online and get some ticket deals. So, but the cost of attending a major league event, whether it's football, baseball, hockey, or basketball, it's not for the faint at heart. It's going to hit your pocketbook a little bit.
Yeah, it always makes me feel, look, some of the great times I had as a kid was going to the ballpark with my dad or going to the ballpark with my buddies. You know, you could do it. You'd see it would be just be so exciting to go and do it. And I just love the idea that baseball, was sort of the melting pot for everybody to go and cheer. And I just don't feel that now. Any of these
Well,
professional sports, it's just so hard for people to afford it. Maybe once a year, but not all the time.
no, and baseball is the more favorable of all the sports. And with even with baseball's pricing, it's really the only sport that you can comfortably take your entire family to. I think at some of the sports now, you know, your idea of going with your buddies, well, those aren't the 16-year-olds anymore. Those your buddies are now, you're all 26 and you have jobs, so you can afford the higher costs of hanging out together and going to a sporting event.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to go to have a good seat at an NBA game, and I figured I'd have to get a second job if I wanted to do that because it's so expensive. Ken, being around 50 years, okay? Tell us what were some of the great players that you saw, coming up. Yeah, I would tell you it's always funny. We talk, my buddies and I will talk about, hey, we were at this little broken down club and we saw this rock band who's now so famous now. Okay, you have seen people who just kind of showed up and they became superstars. Tell us about a few of them.
Well, you know, the first couple of years we were with the Pirates, and the Pirates made that big trade. They traded 6 of the Columbus Clippers off our opening day roster for a infielder called Tim Foley, and that led them to the 1979 World Championship with the "We Are Family" theme. So, you know, we had Dale Berra coming up, and we had Bob Oliver, and we had Eddie Whitson that were all pitchers. Eddie Whitson was a pitcher with the Pirates, and then ended up with San Diego, and then with the Yankees. And then we get to the Yankee years, and the first minor leaguer that George ever gave a chance in the big leagues was a guy by the name of Don Mattingly, and that followed up later with a young kid by the name of Derek Jeter, followed by Mariano Rivera and Bernie Williams and Jorge Posada and Gerald Williams and in the great Yankee teams of the mid to late 90s. And then when we hooked up, we had 2 years with Washington, and then we hook up with Cleveland, and now we've got Carlos Santana and Francisco Lindor and Michael Brantley and Corey Kluber, and the list goes on and on. We also had some great players on the other side. There was in our first year in 77, Joe Morgan was the manager of the Pawtucket Red Sox. And they would come out early when they were in Columbus at our ballpark, and he would hit 50 ground balls every day to a young third baseman. And I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "This kid can hit." He said, "He has to learn how to field. This kid has a chance." This kid's name was Wade Boggs. So he did
Oh,
indeed.
shit.
He did indeed have a chance. And then
So,
we had a catcher when Richmond Braves were in. They were with Atlanta, had trouble catching, couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher, just had that phobia in his head. So they moved him out to center field. His name was Dale Murphy. He went on to have a pretty good career too.
I'd
So
say so.
we've seen Aaron Judge, and we've seen a lot of guys come through on both sides. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to see some great players. One of the great games we had at the old place was a game where we had two pitchers on rehab. Well, our guy was Dave Righetti, and their guy for Detroit, for Boston, the Pawtucket again, was Mark the Bird Fidrich. We had these guys both on injury rehab assignments and had over 15,000 people that night that come out to see those two guys throw.
Ken, when I come down to the ballpark and spend time with you, which is it's such a delight to do it, I will point out the certain players and say, "Do they have? What do you think? Can that guy? Do they have a? Does this guy have a chance?" You are very quick to make a decision. Um, what do you look for? What made an Aaron Judge, or what made a Derek Jeter? Did you see it? And what is it? Or these pitchers? Who you see. How do you do this? And you do it so, of course, 50 years, but at the same time, you're really good at being able to pick them out.
Well, you're being kind. I'm really not that good. Sometimes I just get lucky. I mean, you look for characteristics in guys. You look for infielders that can move both to the right and to the left, a guy who's not afraid to get in front of the baseball, a guy who plants and throws, a guy who goes into the hole, how he makes that pivot. You look at hitters, and you look at how they adjust at every at bat. What do they do when they have two strikes on them? You look at pitchers and see how they try to command the plate. I mean, as a young guy, I was always taught that as a pitcher, it's first pitch strikes and stay ahead of the hitters. Today the analytics have changed that a little bit, and so many of these pitchers are power pitchers. I mean, back in the days of Roberto Clemente and Babe Ruth and all of those great old timers, Hank Aaron, pitchers, once the starting pitcher was out, the relief pitchers weren't nearly as good. So a starter would start to lose 4 or 5 miles over his fastball the second time around the order. And the relievers at that point in time were guys that weren't good enough to be starters. Now, the way they're developing pitchers, everyone throws 100 miles an hour. So, if you're hitting and you're hitting in the seventh inning, you got the starter out. That's not always a bonanza because this new guy's throwing even harder than that.
Let's talk about this. So you got some moms and dads and aunts and uncles that might watch part of this. 100 miles an hour. Now, do we bring these kids along to, like in high school? Or do we need to watch how fast they're throwing? What is it that gives you a long career without having to have what they call Tommy John surgery? Talk to us about that. How do you take care of it, the arm?
Well, the arm, or if you're a catcher, the knees. I mean, you can only bend on your knees so many times. I know that because I've had two replacement knees already. And pitchers, you can, oh, and really, it wasn't even fastballs back then. It was more of the breaking ball. There's only so many times you can snap that elbow throwing a breaking pitch, whether it was a curveball or a screwball, and your elbow is going to give out. I mean, now what happens is kids are so specialized by the time they're 10 and 12 years old that they're concentrating on one sport because their parents are sure they're going to be a professional athlete, and
Yeah.
so they go to camps and they go to a lot of things, and it really depends on the coaches. The coaches, every coach is not going to be Joe Torre or Terry Francona. You're just supposed to help the kids develop and not overuse them. And that's why Major League Baseball really likes to get pitching coming out of high school more than they do coming out of college, because they've thrown less pitches and their arm hasn't been abused is a word they use, but that's really not fair. I mean, they've overthrown too many kids. Skeens is a little bit of a different concept in that area, but there's a lot of college pitchers that have come into Major League Baseball and almost immediately needed Tommy John surgery, and sometimes more than once.
Does that fix it? Does Tommy John surgery explain that to our listeners?
Well, I mean, it's a surgery to repair ligaments in your arm. It takes about 365 days for you to recoup. And a lot of guys have come back and come back strong. Now, some guys have come back and hurt it again and have had a second surgery and have even been stronger. So, doctors can do wonderful things with the body these days. And so some people are being able to use medical procedures to extend their career.
Ken, how does a guy bat against 100-mile-an-hour fastball, gets hit in the face like what happened in Cleveland?
David Fry.
How do they ever come back and bat again?
That's a tough one. I mean, on the other side, look what happened to Herb Score. The line drive from Gil McDougall that hit him in the face and ended his pitching career with Cleveland back in about 1959. He became their broadcaster. I mean, David Fry suffered some superficial facial injuries. He didn't break any bones. It's your inner toughness that's going to make you get back in that box and see if you can hang in there and do that again. That's an individual situation when a guy gets hurt like that, and do they have the mental capacity to get past that injury and put it in their rearview mirror?
It's just, I find it to be like impossible. And then how does somebody with a bat in their hand bat against somebody who's throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastball or making the ball move? How do they hit it?
It's it's such a quick hand-eye coordination move, and that's why they say baseball is still the most difficult sport to play. That the hardest thing to do in any sport is to hit 100-mile-an-hour fastball coming at you from 60 feet 6 inches away. I mean, what has to happen in your mind to focus on that and decide to swing, and not only to swing but where to swing? There are guys that were such good hitters like Ted Williams that said they could actually see the stitches on the baseball when it was a breaking pitch. I never could, and I never faced 100 miles an hour. But that takes. I mean, that's why athletes are the special echelon that they are. And there's only 780 major league players. That's all the kids we have that are that talented at this point in the country.
You mentioned Terry Francona. I don't know his full history, but I know he did a great job with Cleveland. Now he's in Cincinnati. Why are some of these managers? What makes them so special? What do they do in the clubhouse that allows them to take their teams to another level?
Well, you've been a leader for a long time, and you know how important everyone is who's on your team. The special managers, I'll use a couple situations. Joe Torre with the Yankees from 1996 to 2000, Francona with the Indians, and now Dave Roberts with the Dodgers. They have an uncanny ability to relate to the players in their clubhouse. And that involves a lot of things. The players have wives, they have girlfriends, they have families, they have parents. A good manager understands all of that, and he can talk through all of that. And the players feel free to talk to them the manager and confide in them when they're having some issues. So there's some managers that just want to focus on the game, on the field, and they don't want to be involved in the other things. That's not the ideal major league manager today. Today, as in any workforce, the personality of your workforce is something that you must be able to engage with and understand. Yeah, we have obviously I'm an oldster, and as I step away, there's a lot of young, great kids in our office. The one thing I've learned to do is step back and let them do what they do best. Don't try to force my ways on them. Sometimes you got to correct them if they get a little bit overboard a little bit, but young people have great ideas, and they're why this country keeps moving forward with the great educators that we have.
What about the Savannah Bananas? What the heck has happened here? I mean, we knew about the Harlem Globetrotters. What are these? Who are these people? What are they? And are they getting crowds?
Oh my gosh, they're packing every place in. They started out in minor league baseball. We had them a year ago in Columbus, and we packed the park 3 nights. They have since moved on to NFL stadiums and major league stadiums, and they are packing the park. Now, this guy Jesse Cole had a great idea. I actually met him. He came to a baseball seminar we had in Columbus in 2017, I think. And he learned a lot of the game there. He learned some of the fun things we did in minor league baseball. And then COVID came along, and then Major League Baseball got rid of 42 teams. So now he had all these athletes who were pretty darn good players at the Class A and maybe Double A level who didn't have jobs. So he decided, he and his wife, to move forward with this crazy idea of playing crazy baseball like the Harlem Globetrotters did, and with even to a time limit. When they came to Columbus, I found it very unnerving when they put the time clock on at 2 hours on our left field wall, and when it counted down to zero, the game was over. So, I mean, he's found a niche. He's very entertaining, and people have just fallen for them. And now they have 4 teams, and they're touring, and they go everywhere. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's fabulous.
All right, I just have two more questions. Now we talk a lot about age, right? And we're finding these athletes performing later and later and later. What's the limit, Ken? And why do you think some of them are able to perform for as long as they can? Your sense of all that.
Well, it has to do from a player standpoint of how well you take care of your body. Back in the olden days, once the season was over, Babe Ruth would put on 20 pounds eating hot dogs and drinking beer. And those old guys would go to spring training, and they'd really have to work themselves in shape.
Right.
Nowadays, when the season's over, these guys train year round. Some of these guys will go play winter ball in the Dominican. Some of the younger kids are in the Arizona League now. Most of them will get jobs between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Amazon is one of their great employers. They lift boxes and they stay physically active. And then when February comes around, they're back in hitting cages and throwing programs. They never let their body get out of shape. They take care of their body both mentally and physically, and they're able to stay healthy and stay on the field. And when you add that into the fact that there's less players in the system, as I said, coming up through the pipeline, they need some of these older guys to hang in there because they are better than the young kids coming up who haven't had enough repetition. So that's how you get the age imbalance, with some guys playing pretty well into their mid 30s.
What about into the 40s, Ken? What was Nolan Ryan when he finally
He was close.
retired?
He was 40. Yeah, he was close to 40. There's a couple guys. Right now, they probably would tend to be designated hitters for the most
Right.
part. Um, Not so much playing positionally out in the field. First base would be an easier position for them to play. Certainly not the outfield or catching. And if they still have their hand-eye coordination, then they can still hit a fastball. Teams will find a place for them.
Ken, greatest game you'd ever witnessed?
The greatest baseball game I ever
Yeah.
witnessed.
Yes.
Oh boy. Um, I really probably couldn't name one. Uh, We had we had a perfect game one time. German Germano threw it for us. And that was pretty special. It was at home in Columbus. We've had some championship games and some playoff games that were neat. I've seen some neat games in Cleveland. The 2016 World Series, we were fortunate enough to go to all 7 games, the 3 in Chicago and the 4 in Cleveland. So, but I've been very fortunate in seeing some great baseball games over the years.
Okay, last one is our man Otani. what people are saying the greatest baseball player since Babe Ruth. What does Ken Schnacke say?
He may be the greatest baseball player of all time. I mean, to
Really?
do
Of
to
all
do
time?
to do what he is doing, hitting home runs, pitching into the 7th inning, no one's been able to do that. I mean, Babe Ruth was a prolific hitter, and he started out as a pitcher, and he was okay, but he was better as a hitter. Roberto Clemente was a great player. We lost him way too early. Ted Williams and Bob Feller and some of those guys had their careers interrupted by the World War when they served our country. So, but for ever since that time, and no one has done what Otani has done. I mean, it's shocking in a way. And I mean, he's had some surgeries, he's had some injuries, but to go out there every day and lead off and be the designated hitter and then pitch every 5th day and like he did the other day, get into the 7th inning with only 1 hit. That's phenomenal.
What do you think it is, Ken?
I mean, it's genes to some degree, and it's him taking care of himself and just being a special athlete that has trained properly and been raised properly and has had great coaches that have prepared him.
Interesting.
And he's just on top of his game. I mean, I've never seen anybody better.
You know, I have such a special place in my heart for baseball. I really do want to see these small market teams begin to boom, and even if they have to go through a strike or whatever, kind of get things balanced up, because no matter where you live, if you've got a football team in the NFL, you got a team you think can win. And we just need to get that back with baseball. And when I think, my hero, my mother, I'll never forget the morning my mother walked in my bedroom crying. And it was the day that they announced that Roberto Clemente had lost his life trying to go on a humanitarian trip. I think it was to Nicaragua, and the plane wasn't put together the right way, and we lost Clemente. Ken, one of the other thrills in my life was when I was running for president. I got one of my guys said, "Well, there's a guy that really wants to help you. His name is Bob Feller," and I go, "That's great, great." And no, he lives in Iowa, all this stuff. Well, it turned out it really was Bob Feller. And
Yes.
I got to spend a lot of time with him. And when he died, his wife asked me if I would do one of the eulogies. And I remember being in Cleveland at the time. And I said, if you go to Cleveland Stadium and you come out of that left field fence, you see this statue of Bob Feller. And as far as I'm concerned, Bob Feller has never gotten old and never will, because we'll always remember him like he was. Youth, character, performance, excellence. Baseball can do that if there's any time we need heroes now to be good role models, to play the game the right way, for kids to be able to see what it's like to play by the rules and have respect, it's now, isn't it? Baseball can become a wonderful, wonderful example for young people about the way to conduct yourself.
And we do need these heroes, and we need them in all sports. And to some degree, baseball has not done as good a job as some of the other sports in promoting some of their individual heroes. So when I ask you, think of here's a question for you: the 4 major sports, baseball, football, hockey, and basketball. What name comes to mind first when you think of each sport in today's uh, world?
Well, yeah, I
Baseball.
mean, well, when I think of baseball, I think of Clemente. When I
Okay.
think of, when I think, well, I mean, with football, I'd have to really give that a little bit of thought, because I think we've seen, Gale Sayers, or You know, there were
Okay.
so many great ones in basketball. I'm having a big argument in the gym all the time because I keep saying LeBron and they keep saying Michael Jordan, but
Okay.
you can't miss with either of them.
No.
Uh, and then in hockey, would probably be Gretzky, right?
Gretzky. Yeah.
And then if I think about tennis, I would probably say Federer is probably what
Okay.
I would say. What a classy guy he is. And in golf, Arnold Palmer.
Okay. But see, none of those people are current. We're having a problem
Yeah, right.
promoting current players and getting them in the mindset of young people today. And some of that is just lost in the cluster of social media
You are
and
right,
what goes
Ken.
on in the world.
Yeah, you're like a philosopher too, not just a baseball expert.
Yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for taking the time. I hope you found this interesting. Ken is really a remarkable guy. I'll be seeing him at the ballpark again this year. He'll be telling me who's going up to the majors and who's not. Most of the time, he'll be right. Once in a while, he'll be wrong, and I'll always remind him of it. But he's been my pal for a long time. And back in the old day, when we played that congressional baseball game, he allowed me out on the field to dress in the Columbus Clippers uniform and carry the pride of Columbus to that baseball game, Ken. I
And
wasn't bad either. You know that
no,
I was
you
not
weren't bad.
bad.
And I'll never forget the night where we found that picture of you in your uniform sitting in the dugout and showed it to Karen and your daughters, and they had not seen it, and they couldn't believe that was Dad in a Clipper dressed up and in the dugout. That was great.
All right, Ken. Thanks for taking the time, and I'll see you soon.
Okay,
And God bless you.
thank you.
Thanks. All right.
Okay, bye, Governor.